a person in custody and being questioned by investigators right now. Again, we are being told that by one law enforcement source. This investigation really picking up today when those new images were released, especially that video. Law enforcement sources telling us they expected a flood of calls to come in. We don't at this point know what broke this case, but we know people were calling into the command center. That video of the suspect on the porch on the front area of Nancy's home, that they were able to see that that person had two pairs of gloves on. He did have what appeared to be a gun in his front waistband in a holster there. Approached the house, he was covered, but you could still see things, right? You could see that his eyebrows were very well groomed. They were trimmed. He appeared to have a mustache. So a lot was gleaned from that, as well as the person's gait. And in an earlier post from Savannah Guthrie herself said, someone knows this person. If you really look at it, the law enforcement sources we talked to said, hey, that gait, the movement, the backpack, the clothing, there was enough there to generate some tips, some leads. We can tell you that Pima County Sheriff's Office, as well as the FBI, Border Patrol, the task force officers, they have been working nonstop since Nancy has gone missing 10 days ago, following several leads. We know, again, just talking about the radius, we're about an hour and a half south of Tucson here near the border, the U.S.-Mexico border here. Agents have also been around the Tucson area. But again, at this point, we know a person is in custody. That person is being questioned by law enforcement at this time. We don't have much more than that. We don't know where they were taken into custody. We don't know if there's any connection at this point. We don't know who that person is. We're expecting to learn much more in the coming hours. We still haven't heard if there's a press conference planned. Kash Patel saying earlier, FBI director saying earlier, they were looking at some people of interest, a person of interest, sort of knowing what was about to happen. And the FBI director, correct, we are told, again, a person is in custody, being questioned at this time. Back to you.
Mark, when we see that video today, 10 days after the abduction, it leaves us wondering, why haven't we seen that video earlier, especially if it was going to be so helpful to the investigation as it appears to have been today?
That's a very good question, and that's something we asked law enforcement as well. It appears that there was some technical issues with the camera, with that Nest camera, and that investigators, specifically, this is something the FBI is very good at. FBI agents from Quantico across the country, very good at this sort of technological move. They were able to sort of get in, work with private companies, and access that video. We were told, I'm not tech savvy at all. And the way it was explained to me from a law enforcement source is, if you're walking on the beach, those footprints, you leave imprints. So even if a camera isn't rolling on you, isn't recording, those prints are in that device. You just have to have the right people sort of get in and extract that. And this morning, they were able to extract those images, the still photos, as well as that video. They got that video out, and hours later, you now have a person in custody. And again, that video, if you look at it, well, it's not color, it's black and white. What does it really show? But it showed so much to investigators, as well as if you knew that person, if you knew the gait of that person, the movement, the eyebrows, the possible mustache, that was enough to have someone pick up the phone and call. And also for investigators, if you look at that video on the front porch area, you see the person, but you also see that archway. Based on that, investigators are able to take that sort of fixed position, look at the suspect, measure the suspect. They can give you the suspect's height, a weight on the ground. You see those tiles, those pavers on the ground right by the front door. Investigators tell me they're able to look at those tiles, take the measurement of those tiles, and then take the shoe, sort of the measurement of the suspect's shoe, figure out a shoe size from there. So much was gleaned from this information. Again, it's a strategic move. We're told that they were able to obtain these this morning. They got those out there to the public, for the public's knowledge, but also important, we were told that as much as it was for the public, it was also for the suspect, for the person who possibly was on that porch, to say, look, it's closing in. They know who you are. They're moving closer to figuring this out. And the hope is, in many cases, that the suspect, the person, makes a move, hoping to cover their tracks, but really they expose themselves. They make a phone call. They drop a piece of clothing. they just make a move to sort of uncover who they are. They're also able to get a timeline from that, and cell phone dumps. So much information is gleaned from that video. They're also in the neighborhood just sort of doing old-fashioned police work, talking to people. We talked to a resident. She had an FBI agent at her door today. She lived in the area around Annie Guthrie's home. FBI agents came up to the door, asked if there was any surveillance video, if they saw anything. So you had a multiple-pronged investigation. And the investigation, and this is important, this is not a finish line. This is not a finish line because a person is in custody being questioned. This, in a big sense, in a sense, is a start line. They're going to sort of talk, see if they can get any information from the person, and then they work backwards. Where was that person in the days before? Does that person know Nancy, know the family? Does that, what connections, what possible connections? So there's so much work to still be done. Again, a person has been detained. That person's being questioned, but at no means is this investigation over. And again, and most important, Nancy still hasn't been found. So we're still waiting to hear any word from investigators on that. But at this point, according to one law enforcement source, a person is in custody and that person is being questioned.
And that is the breaking news of this hour. A person has been detained and is now being questioned in the abduction of Nancy Guthrie, Savannah Guthrie's mother. Joining our coverage now is Rob D'Amico, MS Now National Security and Intelligence Analyst and former FBI Special Agent. Rob, what is your reading of the situation at this hour?
Well, like Mark said, a person in custody is not the end of this. Obviously, the end of this is finding Nancy. If this person is connected, what part of the connection is this person being questioned? In certain kidnapping rings, when it's an organized ring, they only have people to do certain things. Part of it may be getting the kidnapper. Part of it may be driving a vehicle. And then they're out of where the actual detention of the kidnapped person is. So if they get them, sometimes they may be involved in it, but they don't even understand or know where the person that was kidnapped is. So it depends on what kind of ring this is. It depends on the knowledge of the person. It depends if it's the right person or it's someone that looked like in the video and they had enough other corroborating evidence to bring them into custody, to question them. So it is the start, and it may be a person involved that actually doesn't know the location, which is going to be frustrating in itself. But it would lead to other things when you start, if you took the person in custody and they had a phone and then you start exploiting that phone. So there are many things that can happen with this, but it is something right now.
If the release of that video today did create a break in the case, this break that we might be seeing tonight, what was the delay in releasing that video over the last 10 days? What could that have been about?
I don't think they had the video. I think they, as Mark said, is from what I'm hearing, is they got this video today. Whatever technology they're using, if it was folks back in Quantico, sometimes depending on how they got it, it was in the cloud and they're working with Nest engineers to somehow figure out how to get it from their systems, or was it something in the camera, as Mark had said, that there's images made even when it wasn't transported to the iCloud, and it's resident on the camera. They may not have known it, and just working with the engineers at Nest, the folks back at Quantico were able to capture it, because I believe they released it as soon. I think the only people they showed it to first to see if they knew who it was the family. If the family could recognize that person, then they wouldn't have to go out to the public. If the family looked at it and said, "Oh, that's so-and-so, I really believe it's so-and-so," they may not have released it because they didn't have to at that point to get that information. But when the family looked at it, from what I heard earlier, was they said, "This person's not familiar to us. We don't know them." And then that's when they decided to release it to the public. So I don't think it was a matter of they were holding it, trying to do something with it before they release it. I believe they finally got to that technology in order to do that, because the people at Quantico are the cutting edge folks. They're the ones that really do things that you can't do in the field, All the national level folks are back there, many PhDs and electrical engineers. They're not agents, they are technical folks at the engineering and research facility, which is what we used to call it. But they're the ones that do this. Like if it's SD card, a micro SD card is smashed, you take the pieces and they get data off of that, and then they piece it together to make the video and stuff. So I don't know exactly what technology was done, but I think the video was just gleaned today, and then they released it from there.
Rob, I'm thinking back to the investigation of the shooting at Brown University, where there was an announcement like this, where someone was brought in for questioning in that shooting and then released. And the investigation went in a completely different direction ultimately. And so as of tonight, what is the next stage of this you'd be expecting if this really is a breakthrough tonight?
I would expect it's going to go on. Again, if the person is overwhelmed, wasn't expecting to get caught, and it happens, and they start talking, do they have to then, as I talked about earlier, were they captured with the cell phone that they're now going to have to exploit that cell phone? Does the person give them their password? If it's a phone and they don't have the password, again, that may have to go back to Quantico in order to break the security code, in order to look at their encrypted apps. That's the big thing. Most criminals communicate on encrypted apps, and in transit, the FBI cannot obviously intercept or decrypt that. You have to have a device, but once you have the device, then you have to be able to open it. And then there's ones that, delete within so many seconds of being seen. There are some technologies out there. I work with a software company that can actually grab some of those depending on how it's captured, and look at those. So it's a matter of, is a person cooperative? Are they talking? Does the person actually know if they're involved? Do they know other aspects of the group and what they're doing? Because again, the professional groups, they each have a role. This one does this, and a lot of times they don't tell those persons that are involved in something that it's where the location is. That's where it was in Afghanistan. You had a group that did the kidnapping. You had a group that transported it. Once you got from Afghanistan, you had a group that transported in Pakistan, and then so on. And then you had guards, and none of them knew the other part of the equation. So you could capture them that they're involved, and they really couldn't lead you to the hostage or the kidnapped person.
Mark Santia, if you're still with us, I believe Mark is still with us in Arizona. Is there any indication at this hour that there will be any official communication tonight, any kind of press conference, any kind of statement?
Once I reached out to Pima County Sheriff's Office a short time ago, I was told to monitor social media. At this point, there was no press conference in place. As Rob was saying, though, there's still so much work to be done. We're hoping, they were very forthcoming, very communicative to the media in the beginning days, and we've really sort of seen them slow down on some of those press conferences and interviews. So we're hoping to learn more. At this point, we've not been given a heads up that there's any press conferences. We were told, again, to monitor their social media accounts. But as Rob was saying, so much work is still needed to be done. And I think what's most important, yes, a person is in custody. They're being questioned. We've confirmed that, a law enforcement source. But we've also, I think there's still more questions than answers at this point. And the main question being, where is Nancy? How is Nancy? I think that right now, as Rob was talking about earlier, that is the looming question. So a person is in custody being talked to, but at this point, we still don't have any information about Nancy.
Mark Santia, thank you for bringing us that breaking news tonight. We will be back to you over the course of this hour as any more developments occur. Rob D'Amico, thank you very much for joining our live coverage of this breaking news. We'll be right back.
We're standing up for our right to be lazy.
By sitting down.
And reclining back. Because we work hard and want to relax harder.
We, the lazy, are taking back lazy.
On our Lazy Boy furniture.
Lazy Boy.
Prosecutors who have found nothing to pursue in the Epstein files tried and failed to get indictments against 6 Democratic members of Congress for saying this.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution.
We know this is hard and that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
The Army,
Our Navy,
The Air Force.
your vigilance is critical.
and know that we have your back.
Because now, more than ever,
The American people need you.
We need you to stand up for our laws,
our Constitution,
and who we are as Americans.
The New York Times broke this news tonight, reporting federal prosecutors in Washington sought and failed on Tuesday to secure an indictment against 6 Democratic lawmakers who posted a video this fall that enraged President Trump by reminding active duty members of the military and intelligence community that they were obligated to refuse illegal orders. 4 people familiar with the matter said. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, this is one of those moments that we have never before seen in the history of this country. Donald Trump getting his so-called Justice Department to try to prosecute members of Congress for publicly reciting the law. Not once in the history of this country has that ever happened.
Lawrence, this is a stunning development. It is really hard to overstate the significance of this, the assault, the frontal assault on the rule of law. The Justice Department under Pam Bondi, no doubt acting under the instructions of the President of the United States, sought to indict 6 members of Congress for exercising their First Amendment rights, for serving their constituents, for upholding their responsibility as representatives. They sought to indict 6 members of Congress. It is just such a shock to see the rule of law so betrayed, so utterly betrayed. If we look at this period in the future and the milestones on the road to dictatorship, this is a big one to consider how this Justice Department has been misused, how it's been weaponized in such a blatant fashion. And the fact that the grand jury rejected it, of course, is very significant because that's so unusual. But it shouldn't dissuade us or fail to have us appreciate the lawlessness of what they tried to do. The fact it was unsuccessful, yes, should be applauded. The fact they tried, though, is a 5-alarm fire.
I want to read Senator Mark Kelly's response to this tonight. He said, "This is an outrageous abuse of power by Donald Trump and his lackeys. It wasn't enough for Pete Hegseth to censure me and threaten to demote me. Now it appears they tried to have me charged with a crime, all because of something I said that they didn't like. That's not the way things work in America. Donald Trump wants every American to be too scared to speak out against him. The most patriotic thing any of us can do is not back down." Senator, it also seems one of the patriotic things we can do is not shirk our duty to serve when called for jury duty. That grand jury in Washington, D.C. stood up for the Constitution.
They sure did, and they've done so now time and time again with this lawless administration. But I applaud Mark Kelly for his statement, and Alyssa Slotkin and Jason Crow. Basically what they're saying, what I'm saying, what all of us are saying that are sort of in the crosshairs of this Department of Injustice is basically screw you. We're not going to stop for one moment speaking out. We're going to do our job as representatives, no matter what you throw our way. And I think we all have to do this. Members of Congress, certainly, but universities need to push back. Law firms need to push back. Companies need to push back. While we still have a democracy, none of us can hide. We all have to tell the administration they can buzz off, they can screw off. Screw them. We're not going to give in to this kind of despotism because this is such a serious threat to our democracy. And I know we've seen a lot of them and we can get numb to it. But what we have just witnessed today is just a full-on assault on our free speech rights and the right of Americans to be represented in Congress by their chosen representatives, and not to have the administration weaponize the Justice Department to try to remove them from office.
Senator Mark Kelly calls the people in the Justice Department who did this Donald Trump's lackeys. That's a kind word for what's happening in that Justice Department, where they are very eager to follow Donald Trump's illegal orders. Going back to your experience working in that Justice Department as a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, what would you have done if they came to you and said, we want you to present this to a grand jury to get an indictment against these members of Congress for reciting the law?
I would have said, hell no, I quit. And it's telling that the only person apparently on this indictment willing to submit this is Pirro, the U.S. attorney herself. None of the career people evidently wanted their names on this. And they understand that what they have been asked to do in seeking an indictment on a fraudulent basis like this is a violation of their code of ethics. It's probably a violation of their ethical standards under the Bar Association. It may be worse than that. And they don't want to be tarred by this the way Pirro will be tarred forever by this. But Bondi, Blanche, Pirro, all of these people in the Justice Department, I know they won't, but they should be completely ashamed of themselves. It's just disgraceful conduct. And I think any prosecutor asked to bring baseless cases like this needs to do their civic duty and say, I won't do it, and be willing to be fired or to quit. Because, you know, we all need to show that courage that the grand jury showed and that others have demonstrated in standing up to this president who wants to be a dictator.
And it seems to be the same kind of cowardice that led to that raid on the Fulton County voting records. The FBI, for the first time in history, going in and seizing voting records. All those people you see marching in there in their FBI uniforms, following those orders, they're also in a position to say no.
They are, and we have seen some of the top leadership at the FBI be fired or quit because they're upholding their ethical duty. They're not willing to fire prosecutors who worked on legitimate cases. They're not willing to dismiss or seek the dismissal of valid cases like the case involving the mayor of New York who's charged with corruption. You're seeing prosecutors and FBI agents quit rather than do unethical or unlawful things. You're seeing the head of CDC do the same thing. You're seeing countless examples of courage, and frankly, those examples should inspire all the rest of us. We should look to them, not look to these who are betraying our laws, our institutions. You know, the Bondis and the Blanches, they're the betrayers. But there are some really courageous people that are saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I would rather quit or be fired than go along with such an egregious abuse of power.
Senator Adam Schiff, thank you very much for joining us tonight on this breaking news.
Thanks, Lawrence.
And coming up, we have more breaking news to cover tonight. Donald Trump and Mike Johnson lost a key vote on the Trump tariffs tonight in the House of Representatives. Neil Katyal, who argued the case against the Trump tariffs in the Supreme Court, will join us next. huge loss for Donald Trump in the House of Representatives, with Republicans defecting to vote with Democrats against Donald Trump. Tonight, House Speaker Mike Johnson tried and failed to block any vote to repeal Donald Trump's tariffs until July, knowing that such a vote could pass the House of Representatives at any time, with a majority of the House now opposed to Donald Trump's illegal and unconstitutional tariffs. The Wall Street Journal called it a stinging rebuke of GOP leadership that paves the way for challenges to Trump's signature economic policy. Wall Street Journal reports the vote means that Democrats will be able to bring resolutions challenging Trump's tariffs to the House floor, setting up a series of high-profile votes that could begin as soon as Wednesday. And this morning, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was asked what's taking the Supreme Court so long to decide the Trump tariff case.
So let's talk about the law. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution. This is not for you. This is for our viewers who are going to wonder. Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and exercises. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, the Commerce Clause, to regulate commerce with foreign nations. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 2, no state shall, without consent of the Congress, lay any imposts or duties on imports or exports. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but this seems kind of clear.
Were you speaking English?
Yeah. But this seems kind of clear to me. So, and this is not a question about what you are deciding, but I think people want to know, well, why is it taking so long to reach a decision on tariffs?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about the
tariff decision,
opinion. Well, there are lots of nuanced legal issues that the court has to thoroughly consider. We had oral arguments, as we normally do in cases, and people may not be familiar with the court's process. We actually deliberate over a period of time where each of the justices decides how they feel about the issues and writes, and it takes a while to write.
So that's the answer? And
yes.
When you're still writing, you're still deliberating.
The court is going through its process of deliberation, and, the American people expect for us to be thorough and clear in our determinations, and sometimes that takes time.
And just last night, Donald Trump explained his method of setting tariffs that he wants the Supreme Court to make constitutional.
I got an emergency call from, I believe, the Prime Minister of Switzerland, and she was very aggressive, but nice, but very aggressive. Sir, we are a small country. We can't do this. We can't do this. I couldn't get her off the phone. We are a small country. I said, you may be a small country, but we have a $42 billion deficit with you. No, we are a small country. Again and again and again. I couldn't get her off the phone. So it was at 30%. And I didn't really like the way she talked to us. And so instead of giving her a reduction, I raised it to 39%.
Joining us now is Neil Katyal, former acting U.S. Solicitor General, who has argued the Trump tariff case before the Supreme Court on behalf of the businesses challenging the Trump tariff policy. He's also a professor at Georgetown Law and an MS Now legal analyst. Neil, there was Donald Trump explaining the process that he thinks is constitutional, that he can set the tariff based on the way someone he speaks to in another country sounds to him or how long he stays on the phone.
Yeah, Lawrence, it's really good to be with you, first of all. And unlike some litigants, I'm not here to predict the court's outcome or to litigate this case on TV or anything or threaten what's going to happen if we lose. But, look, I have faith the court, it's a pending case. I argued the case back on November 5th. I have faith that the court's going to apply the best understanding of the Constitution. And, our message on November 5th and in our briefs, and I'll stick to that here on your show, is very simple. The Constitution, the framers, our nation's 250 years of history are clear. Only Congress has the power to impose taxes on Americans, and tariffs are nothing but taxes that Americans pay, paid by Americans, levied on Americans. And so that was our simple message back on November 5th, and we're hopeful that the court will heed it.
And that case arrived at the Supreme Court after a unanimous decision by the Court of International Trade, which is a special court in New York City, where all the judges working on that court are the judicial experts on international trade. It's all they do. And they were unanimous on it. They were completely clear. Everything you thought you knew about this in high school turned out to be true, according to them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Specialized Court of International Trade found it was illegal. The Court of Appeals, in our case, found it was illegal. And a separate court in Washington, D.C. found it illegal. So when it went up to the Supreme Court, every court to have ruled on the question found that Donald Trump's taxes and tariffs were illegal. And I don't mean to just isolate Trump. I mean, the case was not about any particular president. It's about the presidency. It's not about partisanship. It's about principle. And that principle is really simple. It's exactly the way you started this segment tonight, Lawrence, which is, under our Constitution, it's Congress that holds the ball game, not the president when it comes to setting tariffs. I mean, we had the Boston Revolution over this kind of Boston Tea Party over this kind of stuff of levying taxes on Americans. And so, that's what the case is about. And we're hopeful that the court will listen to what we said.
One of the reliefs of actually listening to the Supreme Court arguments is that's the one time that the Trump position was not that foreign countries pay the tariffs. They didn't try to stand up there and defend those tariffs the way Donald Trump does, pretending that somebody in China pays the tariffs imposed on things that we import and buy from China. At least that lie was eliminated from the Supreme Court argument.
Well, I mean, at times the government did make that argument to the Supreme Court and say the tariffs weren't a revenue raising measure and that it's borne by other folks. So I'm not quite sure that's right. But I do agree with the general gist of what you're saying, Lawrence, which is look, the great thing about this country is that we can have a Supreme Court where we can bring these challenges and settle them under law, not by force or anything else. And I think, I hope that your viewers listen to the argument, because I thought really it did crystallize the positions of both sides, and the justices were asking really tough and fair and thoughtful questions to all of us. And that process to be part of is really something very special. And so, as we think about, where our American democracy goes, I think the court has an important role to play in our future.
Yeah, when you listen to these arguments sometimes, you can think about the sides in various ways. But when I listen to your argument that day, it was so clear to me that you were standing there representing the founders. You were standing there representing the authors of the Constitution who wrote this directly into the Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely true. I can just tell you my state of mind at that time was I really was thinking about Madison and Hamilton and Jefferson and what happened in Boston. And for me, the son of immigrants, to be doing that and trying to remind America and our great court about what our values are, there was no higher privilege I could ever have as a lawyer or as a citizen.
Neil, we're going to squeeze in a commercial break here. When we come back, there's another important case you've been handling that Donald Trump has been losing. We'll come back with that next.
When dry eyes need a boost,